everyone, today we're going to get you on your way to mastering the Defensive Conjurer Catalyst. She has a lot of potential to provide a nice mix between defensive, aggressive, and even some support capabilities to any squad that she is a part of. Lots to talk about, so let's just get right into it. Kicking it off with one of the more useful parts of Catalyst Kit is going to be her passive barricade. This is going to allow her to fortify 2 doorways, forcing players to kick 4 times instead of the 2 breakdown doors. A big thing to note is that the doors will still be breakable in a normal fashion when getting hit by grenades or other damage dealing abilities such as Fuse's clusters. She can also block off broken doorways, and this functions slightly different from reinforcing doors. Players will only have to kick the normal 2 times to break these blocked off spaces. A big tip and tactic to know is that both Catalyst and her team can still open reinforced doors. One of the strongest playmaking things a Catalyst and her team can do is to wait for enemies to begin to kick the 4 times and then make a counterplay by opening the reinforced door when they are doing so. This will allow you to get some shots on the enemies, and if you are quick about it, you can shut the door at any moment and then the enemy will not be able to open fire on you. Having the capability to open the door at any time when the enemy has no capability is very powerful, and it should not be slept on. The second typical play that you can do is to wait for enemies to back off of a door and look for an alternate angle to get into your area. As soon as they turn their attention away from the door, you can open the door and make a counterplay when their back is turned to you. If we look at the blocked off door spaces, you can still make plays in a similar manner to the reinforced door method. Just know that you will be required to tear down that reinforced door, and it isn't quite as safe or effective as making plays as the reinforced door method. A huge thing to note is that there is a 3-second cooldown once you reinforce the space that is broken, which is the game's method of balancing it, so you cannot just spam it. There is pretty much no cooldown though on the amount of doors you can reinforce, so it's always wise to reinforce 2 doorways as soon as you do move into a new area, so you can't keep your playmaking options open, and it really requires no effort to do so don't be lazy. Our next tip is a general overarching one, but you will want to keep an eye on your rotations and movements. Try to stick near buildings as much as possible, as this is really where Catalyst excels. If you are fighting in open areas, you basically don't have a passive, and in order to make the most of her kit, you want to avoid doing this. Not everyone is doing it yet, but as the seasons progress, players will learn that using a grenade or a damage ability on a reinforced doorway is just going to be the way to go. This does make quick work of those reinforced doors, and you don't need to waste time trying to kick it down when you are in a fight. You want to keep a keen eye or ear on the grenades if they are tossed. If you are able to get quickly to that door, you will be able to reinforce the door after 3 seconds, and or you can make a counterplay by sending some shots out right before the enemy tries to get into your building. Another counterplay or tactic that you can utilize though is going to be her tactical, the piercing spikes. Catalyst Tactical is a trap that she can place on the ground that lasts an infinite amount of time or until it is destroyed. When an enemy comes in contact with this, they are going to take 15 points of damage over time and will slightly be slowed down. She can also store 2 charges for rapid deployment and setup of areas, and she can have 3 placed on the ground at once. The traps do take a quick 25 seconds to come back, which is not too bad, and you can manually destroy and refund a trap if it has not activated. The first big tip in regards to the piercing spikes is that they work as a great audio and visual detection as to the enemy's locations. After placing the trap on the ground, they are more or less just stay as a puddle or a pool on the ground, but once an enemy does get near it, they will activate, and thus you can see a visual and audio indication to notify you when enemies are approaching the area. A second technique in using these tactical traps is that when you are fighting around buildings, we already know how strong Catalyst passive barricade is, but if we look at how the trap functions, when she is in and around buildings and on doors, the traps actually will deploy under doorways, which will let her get enemies off the doors, and in turn, you can push into the building or keep people away. This also means comboing the passive and tactical to provide even more reinforcement on a singular doorway is not a bad thing to do, but in my opinion, the better way to use Catalyst 3 traps and 2 doorway reinforcements, a quick 1 or 2 taps on doorways to keep them reinforced, and then deploy her 3 traps on 3 separate spots or 3 different doorways. This way you can cover a lot more space, and you'll be better prepared to fortify your area. Another big thing that gives these traps a boost over some other Legends traps like Caustic and his gas traps is that Catalyst can toss these traps pretty far, which greatly lets her set up quickly or apply pressure as she does approach a fight. Additionally, with this though, you can use the tactical spikes like you would with a vert nade, and this can be very powerful to get enemies off of high ground when they are above you, and you can combo the trap and a grenade at the same time to really mess up players who aren't actively looking at what you are doing. The spikes in general though are pretty easy to destroy. They only have 300 health, and they do take double the amount of damage from weapons. The only way to destroy them though is by shooting the floating orb or the ferrofluid ball that does sit in the middle above the trap. A simple but nice tip is that you can fight fight in and around your tactical spikes. By doing this, you're going to let that orb take some damage and protect you in your one-on-one fights. As of the posting of this video, it is worth mentioning that these spikes seem to seriously mess up Apex Legends' already bad audio. I have found a lot of the times the spikes activating or being on the ground and providing a slight audio in the background seems to completely cancel out some footsteps and other audio from time to time, so you gotta be mindful of this and try to destroy enemy catalyst spikes as quickly as you can. Before we get to this slew of tips and tricks for Catalyst Ultimate, be sure to check out my pinned comment down below. I'll let you know down there how she is faring in the meta and if she has had any changes since this video was posted. Also, never play with randoms. Hop into my community Discord. You can find others to play with. We'd love to have you. Catalyst's premier or ultimate ability is going to be the Dark Veil, which does allow her to spawn a 55 or so meter wall of ferrofluid that blinds and slow any enemies that do walk into it. The ability has a pretty quick and nice 2-minute charge timer, and a big emphasis should be placed on the fact that enemies can still shoot through the wall. Right off the bat though, friendlies and any enemy catalyst will take a reduction in effects when they do come in contact with your wall. They still have that brief slowdown, but it's much less aggressive, and as is the amount players are blinded. The way the wall functions when being placed is very important though, as the wall does have the ability to go over some objects, but anything that is slightly too vertical or too tall or slightly inverted towards the wall is going to stop the wall in its tracks. This is very important to know when you are placing it down, and the blue line that goes out from Catalyst is a great indicator if your ultimate is going to be stopped short. Probably the hugest thing that you need to know though is that the wall has some climbing type properties, and if you are appropriately angling or placing the wall, it can climb up over jagged terrain. This is going to greatly improve the amount of placement options you do have when it comes to using Catalyst's ultimate. This is also going to be true when the ultimate comes in contact with certain abilities like Gibraltar's Dome Shield, Newcastle's ultimate wall, or even Rampart's tactical amped walls. At its core, this wall of ferrofluid is going to block some scanning abilities, the main being Bloodhound and Seer's tactical scan. This is great to cover the team and protect them from getting hit by those scans, and it's also just as nice to stop Seer from canceling those revives or healing abilities. Just note that both Seer's ultimate and Seer's passive Harpy are still able to track and mark for enemy players. Placing the wall down in certain areas when you completely block off larger areas to the point where enemies are forced to walk all the way down to the wall on simply one side of it will greatly let you dictate how enemies can fight you with that wall out. Sending the wall out and having it collide with mountains or other tall areas would be how you can best do this. While this can be used to provide some cover or reset capability, you can also use this method to fight enemies. A Catalyst who is using her wall strategically by poking in and out of random spots of the wall and then dishing out some damage is a really strong method to fight players. Think of this much like you would if you were fighting in and around a Gibraltar's Dome Shield. It's going to be very similar to that. Second to this can be to completely wall off choke points, buildings, and other alleys. By doing this, you either can wait for enemies that have to walk through your wall to get to you and you can beam them, or it will again give you a moment to reset the engagement by healing up, getting your squad revived, or just giving yourself some time to loot. If the area is slightly smaller, you can even place tactical spikes down right on your side of the wall, so if an enemy does decide they want to risk traveling through the wall, not only are they blinded and slowed, they are now going to take even more damage from the tactical spikes. The third and maybe most obvious way to use the wall is to simply place it down when you need to rotate through large open areas, and enemies might have something like a high ground vantage point, or they are simply just a lot of teams around. And a nice technique that you can implement is to place a tactical spike parallel or in line with the wall at the end of the walls. This will better keep enemies away from or looking around and wrapping around your wall, and it's going to force them to go a little bit more wide, and thus they're not going to have quite as much cover to side peek while using Catalyst's wall. There's a few really insane legend pairings that you can rock with Catalyst to make her kit even better and those of your teammates. The two big ones though are of course going to be specific counters to yourself as well. They are going to be Seer and Mad Maggie. Seer's ultimate still generates scans and highlights enemies on the other side, so if you pair both ultimates together, not only do you have this visual protection from enemies, you are also able to shoot through that black abyss of your wall while enemies are still being tracked. Similarly, Mad Maggie's passive of highlighting enemies when she does damage to them means she does have real-time tracking capabilities when she is tagging enemies. Keep in mind that this is going to be a two-way street, and enemy Seers and Mad Maggies can do this to you as well. Another really solid pairing for Catalyst is going to be Newcastle. Not only does the increase in fortification options great for fighting around buildings, it's also nice that Newcastle can revive and pull players through Catalyst's wall to again better increase your chances at the reset. As for where Catalyst stacks up in the meta of Apex Legends, it's kind of tough. Her abilities are all very good, but even then, I think she's more of a middle of the pack legend, something like a solid low to mid A tier, which for me would be just outside a top 10 legend. Mainly this is because she's a little bit too situational situational and really requires to be in and around buildings to make the most of her kit, which won't always be possible. Not to mention, she does lack some offensive power, and while her ultimate is great to make plays and rotate, a lot of the times there's easy ways for other legends to counter her, such as Seer, and Seer is pretty much everywhere. Check out this video right here for 35 tips and tricks to instantly make yourself a better player. Hit that like button, subscribe for more, and I will see you in the next one.